You know Dasher and Dancer and Prancer and Vixen, Comet and Cupid and Donner and Blitzen.
But do you recall the most famous reindeer of all? Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer had a very shiny nose, and if you ever saw it, you would even say it glows. All of the other reindeer used to laugh and call him names. They never let poor Rudolph join in any reindeer games. Then one foggy Christmas Eve, Santa came to say,
Rudolph, with your nose so bright,
won't you guide my sleigh tonight? Then how the reindeer loved him as they shouted out with glee, Rudolph the red-nosed reindeer, you'll go down in history.
'Twas the day before Christmas, and all through the hills the reindeer were playing, enjoying the spills of skating and coasting and climbing the willows and hopscotch and leapfrog, protected by pillows.
Look, fellas, it's Rudolph. His nose is a sight. It's red as a beet.
Twice as big and twice as bright. Looky, looky, I'm Rudolph.
Poor Rudolph. Where most reindeers' noses are brownish and tiny, Rudolph's was red, very large and quite shiny.
Rudolph! Go on home, Red Nose. Your mama's calling you.
Come, come, Rudolph. Tonight you hang up your stocking.
His nose is a sight. It's red as a beet.
Twice as big and twice as bright.
While way, way up north on this dark, foggy night, awaiting the time for his Christmas Eve flight, good old Santa.
This fog will be hard to get through. Quick, get hitched in a hurry. Dasher, Dancer, Prancer, Vixen, Comet, Cupid, Donner, Blitzen. Hi-ho! To keep our direction, we'll have to fly low. Come down here, quick! Hi-ho! Phew, pretty close. Hi-ho!
The air was still foggy, the night dark and drear, when Santa arrived at the home of the deer. But all this took time and filled Santa with gloom, while slowly he groped toward the next reindeer's room. The lamp wasn't burning. The glow came instead from Rudolph's red nose at the head of the bed. And then came the greatest idea in all history. So Rudolph is told of the dark and delay, the fog and the blackness and losing the way.
I need you tonight to lead all my deer on the rest of our flight.
Dear Mommy and Daddy, I have gone to help Santa. Don't worry. Rudolph, that's me.
Hurry, Rudolph. It's very dark here.
With Rudolph's red nose as a wonderful light, old Santa flew quickly the rest of the night. So fast that before it was day, the very last present was given away.
Hear ye, a message from Rudolph.
Yes, they'd found Rudolph's message. It's all over town.
Hear ye, Rudolph at the stadium. Come on, come on.
The bad deer who used to do nothing but tease him, well, now they'd do anything only to please him.
Rudolph, my boy, they'll envy you now, far and near. For no greater honor can come to a deer than riding with Santa and guiding my sleigh. The #1 job on the #1 day. I hope you'll continue to keep us from grief. I hereby appoint you Commander-in-Chief.
And Rudolph just blushed from his head to his toes until his whole fur was as red as his nose.
Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night.
Then all the reindeer loved him as they shouted out with glee. red-nosed reindeer. You'll go down in history.
Contact light. Okay, engine stop. ATA at a descent. Mode control both auto, descent engine command override off. Engine arm off. 13 is in.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Houston, Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Roger, Tranquility. We copy you on the ground. You got a bunch of guys about to turn blue. We're breathing again. Thanks a lot.
And we're getting a picture on the TV. There's a great deal of contrast in it, and currently it's upside down on our monitor, but we can make out a fair amount of detail. Okay, Neil, we can see you coming down the ladder now.
Sunday, July 20th, 1969. Around the world, nearly 1 billion people watched this moment on television as the first man from Earth prepared to set foot upon the moon.
At the foot of the ladder, the lamb footbeds are only depressed in the surface about 1 or 2 inches, although the surface appears to be very, very fine-grained as you get close to it. It's almost like a powder. Ground mass is very fine. I'm going to step off the lamb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the earth.
All that we have accomplished in space, all that we may accomplish in days and years to come, we stand ready to share for the benefit of all mankind.
As we explore the reaches of space, let us go to the new worlds together, not as new worlds to be conquered, but as a new adventure to be shared.
Since the earliest time, man has imagined this moment, the moment when his fellow man would make the first journey to the moon. Now the time had come. In the 6th decade of the 20th century, the ancient dream was to become a reality. The flight of Apollo 11 was the culmination of many years of planning, working, building, and testing. Thousands of people had contributed toward this day of accomplishment. The great Saturn V rocket and the complex Apollo spacecraft had been assembled together and moved to the launch pad. The equipment and techniques and personnel had been proved in earlier missions, and now they were ready. The astronauts chosen for this mission had flown it many times in ground-based simulators. They had all been in space before. They had trained carefully and well, and now they too were ready. Astronaut Michael Collins would pilot the Apollo Command Module. Astronaut Edwin Aldrin Jr. would pilot the Lunar Module. And astronaut Neil Armstrong would serve as mission commander. Armstrong would be the first man to step upon the moon. July 16th, the day had come. The moon awaited. The men rose early, ate breakfast, and dressed in their spacesuits. Other astronauts had made this journey to the launch pad, but never with such anticipation. 9:32 a.m., July 16th. Three hours later, the Apollo Command Module moves forward to extract the Lunar Module from the third stage of the launch vehicle. Both are moving at more than 17,000 miles an hour. Docked together, they will sail 250,000 miles across the sea of space and into orbit around the Earth's nearest neighbor.
Loud and clear now, Mike, and we understand that you are docked.
During the three-day journey to the moon, the astronauts kept busy. Checklists, navigation and observation, housekeeping. They must work in a weightless environment, keeping their spacecraft and themselves in good condition. Data must be collected and reported. Experiments must be performed, including photography both inside and outside the spacecraft. Because of the film speed, these actions appear faster than they actually were. July 19th. Apollo 11 slows down and goes into orbit around the moon. The bright blue planet of Earth now lies 238,000 miles beyond the lunar horizon. Astronauts Armstrong and Aldrin, now in the lunar module, separate from the command module. Astronaut Collins remains behind. Preparation for the lunar module descent to the moon now begins. The command module assumes the new name, Columbia. The lunar module will be called the Eagle. From Columbia, Michael Collins' camera sees bright rays of the sun reflecting patterns of color from the surface of the Eagle. In this strange metallic bird rides the ancient and endless dream of all mankind. The command pilot can see detail which his camera cannot record. The 4 landing pads of the lunar module are fully extended and locked in place. The Eagle is poised and prepared for its descent to the lunar surface. The moon landing craft rocket engine fires to slow it down and to place it on the pathway to the landing site in the Sea of Tranquility. There is tension and caution as the Eagle flies lower. Warning lights blink on as the computer tries to keep up with the demand for control data, but the status remains go.
Eagle, we got you now. It's looking good, over.
Roger, copy.
Eagle Houston, after yaw around angles, S-band pitch, -9er, yaw, +18. Roger, you're a go to continue power descent. You're a go to continue power descent.
Altitude now 21,000 feet, still looking very good. Velocity down now to 1,200 feet per second.
You're looking great to us, Eagle.
Give us a reading on the 1202 program alarm.
Roger, we got you. We're going at alarm.
Good radar data. We're now in the approach phase, everything looking good. Altitude 4,200.
Houston, you're a go for landing, over.
Roger, understand. Go for landing. 3,000 feet.
Copy.
Alarm.
Altitude 1,600. 1,400 feet, still looking very good.
700 feet, 21 down. 33 degrees. 100 feet, down at 19. 1201. 1201.
Roger, 1201 alarm. We're go. Same type. We're go.
Altitude, velocity light. 3.5 down. 220 feet. 13 forward. 11 forward, coming down nicely. 200 feet. 4.5 down. 5.5 down.
60 seconds.
Lights on. 6. Down 2.5. Forward. Forward. That's 40 feet, down 2.5. Picking up some dust. 4 forward. 4 forward, drifting to the right a little. That's okay. Contact light. Okay, engine stop.
We copy you down, Eagle.
Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
Through the window of the Eagle, Armstrong and Aldrin see what no human eyes have ever seen before. Their spacecraft casts a long shadow across the undisturbed dust of centuries. Seven hours after landing, after careful preparations for later ascent were completed, Armstrong opens the Eagle hatch and begins his climb down to the surface. The first footsteps on this strange new world must be taken cautiously. The moon has only 1/6 the gravity of Earth. The nature of its surface was still unknown.
I'm going to step off the limb now. That's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Once on the surface, Armstrong scoops up a small sample of lunar dust and rock, precaution against the possibility of an emergency takeoff. According to plan, astronaut Aldrin now descends from the Eagle. He and his equipment would weigh 383 pounds on Earth. Here, they weigh about 66 pounds. For a brief moment, the first men on the moon stand and look at the stark, lonely landscape around them, an experience which no one before them can share. But there is much to be done in the limited time which they can stay on this airless, cloudless satellite of Earth. This sheet of metal foil traps and holds particles from the sun, the so-called solar wind, or barrage of solar energy, which constantly strikes the moon's surface. Results of this experiment will be taken back to Earth to reveal new secrets to anxious scientists. An American flag is left behind on the moon, together with medals honoring American and Soviet spacemen who lost their lives in earlier space tests, and a small disc carrying messages of goodwill from 73 nations on Earth. A plaque on the lunar module reads, "Here, men from the planet Earth first set foot upon the moon, July 1969 AD. We came in peace for all mankind." Through a specially made television camera, viewers in many nations on Earth were able to watch the astronauts as they walked and worked on the moon. Despite the bulky spacesuits and the backpacks containing oxygen, temperature control, and communications equipment, the Apollo 11 crew found they could move easily about the surface. Because there is no wind or rain on the moon, these footprints will remain for centuries. In addition to collecting rock and soil samples, the explorers leave behind a seismometer. This highly sensitive device would send back valuable information on external meteoroid impacts, as well as internal lunar movements. A 100 prism laser reflector would help man to measure the exact distance from Earth to Moon to an accuracy of 6 inches. These were the first of many experiments which will be taken to the Moon to provide man continuing and increasing knowledge about the Moon and the vastness of space beyond. After 2 hours and 31 minutes, the first lunar explorers had completed their research on the Moon. A night of rest in the lunar module, countdown preparations, and they were ready to come home.
Tranquility Base, Houston. Guidance recommendation is pings, and you're cleared for takeoff.
understand. We're number 1 on the runway. 7, 6, 5, work stage, engine arm ascent. Beautiful. Very smooth. Very quiet ride. There's that one crater on there.
Thousand feet high, 80 feet per second vertical rise.
Eagle Houston, you're looking good at 2. Ping, zags, and misspin all agree. And then right down US 1. Eagle Houston going right down the track. Everything's great.
Horizontal velocity approaching 2,500 feet per second.
Roger.
Some 120 miles to go until insertion.
July 21st. The Eagle and its 2-man crew lifted off the moon perfectly and climbed slowly to rendezvous and dock with the mothership, Columbia. While Armstrong and Aldrin explored the moon, astronaut Collins had kept a long and lonely vigil in the Columbia. The approaching Eagle was a welcome sight. Later, the 3 men would share their reflections on this adventure with the world.
I believe that from the early space flights, we demonstrated a potential to carry out this type of a mission. And again, it was a question of time until this would be accomplished.
I think it's a technical triumph for this country to have said what it was going to do a number of years ago, and then, by golly, do it.
The relative ease with which we were able to carry out our mission, which, of course, came after a very efficient and a logical sequence of flights, I think that this demonstrated that we were certainly on the right track when we took this commitment to go to the moon.
I just see it as a beginning of a new age.
Once again, the bright blue planet of Earth rises over the lunar horizon. For those who had witnessed man's landing in the Sea of Tranquility, the moon would never again appear quite the same. July 24th, dawn in the Pacific. Apollo blazes across the heavens, coming back to Earth at 25,000 miles an hour. President Richard Nixon, who had talked with the astronauts by telephone while they were on the moon, was waiting aboard the recovery carrier to welcome the returning voyagers. The president later expressed the nation's response to this historic mission.
Some way, when those two Americans stepped on the moon, the people of this world were brought closer together. That it is that spirit, the spirit of Apollo, that America can now help to bring to our relations with other nations. The spirit of Apollo transcends geographical barriers and political differences. It can bring the people of the world together in peace.
To protect against any possible lunar contamination, the astronauts put on airtight special garments before coming aboard the rescue ship. They transferred directly from the helicopter to a mobile quarantine van, in which they would be flown back to the Manned Spacecraft Center in Houston, Texas. July 27th. The journey was ended. They were home again. Ahead lay 3 weeks of isolation, medical tests, and mission debriefings. Then visits to major cities of America and abroad. The details of their unique mission would be relived and remembered so that others might learn what they had learned, and that future travelers in space might build upon their experience. The rock and soil samples brought back would be examined and analyzed by scientists in many lands. They would reveal new insights into the origin and the age and the composition of the moon, and perhaps new knowledge of the Earth as well. Already experiments left on the moon were sending back revealing new information. The mission was successfully completed. The Eagle had landed the first men on the moon, and Columbia had returned them safely to Earth. Wherever man journeys tomorrow across the ocean of our universe, history will remind him that Apollo 11 was mankind's first encounter with a new world.
Up in the sky. Look!
It's a bird!
It's a plane! It's Superman!
Faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, able to leap tall buildings at a single bound, this amazing stranger from the planet Krypton, the Man of Steel, Superman. Possessing remarkable physical strength, Superman fights a never-ending battle for truth and justice, disguised as a mild-mannered newspaper reporter, Clark Kent.
And I still say Manhattan rightfully belongs to my people.
Possibly, but just what do you expect us to do about it?
You have a newspaper. Publish the truth. Have the island vacated immediately.
It's fantastic.
Why, that's ridiculous. Ridiculous? Maybe modern science will make you think differently.
I've never heard anything so absurd. You know, from the look in his eyes, I'd almost believe he was in earnest.
No, he's just a harmless crank. Come ahead, Miss Lane. You wouldn't want to miss this story, I'm sure. Just a precautionary measure. Now, Miss Lane, get ready for the greatest story of your career.
Come on, Kent. Let's get out of here.
This looks like a job for Superman.
A girl is still down there.
The old island looks just as good as ever.
That's right, Clark. Thanks to Superman.
Up in the sky, look!
It's a bird!
It's a plane! It's Superman!
Faster than a speeding bullet. More powerful than a locomotive. Able to leap tall buildings at a single bound. This amazing stranger from the planet Krypton. The Man of Steel. Superman. Empowered with X-ray vision, possessing remarkable physical strength, Superman fights a never-ending battle for truth and justice, disguised as a mild-mannered newspaper reporter, Clark Kent.
Lois, what are you doing here?
Oh, just getting the woman's angle on this story.
The mechanical monster! Look out!
Come on, you fool! You want to get trampled?
Now, you wait here. I'll phone this in. Yes, I'll give you the details later, Chief. All right, Lois. Lois! This is a job for Superman.
What a story this is going to make.
The jewels. What have you done with the jewels?
You'll read about it in tomorrow's paper.
Are you going to tell me what happened to those jewels? won't tell me. You'll soon change your mind. Superman! Step and she's doomed.
That's a wonderful story, Lois.
Thanks, Clark, but I owe it all to Superman.
All of us will reach a crossroads in life. A decision that has to be made. Some can be small and insignificant. Others seem like they could shape the course of our entire lives. How can we know the will of God? How can we correctly choose the path He has set out for us? And what if we make the wrong decision? We spend sleepless nights and days filled with anxiety when we place these burdens upon ourselves. Often we become isolated, feeling completely alone in finding the right answer. Sometimes we're tempted to rush into a decision. Other times we'd rather delay indefinitely. But for those who call Him Father, for those who believe in the power of His name, He provides everything we need to follow His will. He gives us His Word as a compass and inspiration. Those who live according to Scripture will always follow in His footsteps. He blesses us with wise counsel through His church and the leaders He has set in place. He hears our every prayer, granting peace and wisdom to those who ask. His very Spirit dwells in us, a still small voice that guides from within our hearts. And in His perfect timing, He will open doors. He will clear the way forward. And no matter the path you choose, you are never alone. He will walk beside you and enfold you with His love, from now until the end of eternity. So trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make your paths straight.
You've probably heard the word engineering before, and you've probably been told it's pretty important. But what exactly is engineering, and who exactly is an engineer? Engineers are people who design and build things that we use every day. However, they don't just go building the first thing that comes to mind. They work hard to make something we need, and they want to do a good job of it. So how do engineers decide what they need to build? Well, in most cases, they start with a question. Here's an example. Say you live on a space station and something outside breaks. Obviously, you need to go outside and fix it, but how exactly do you do that? That's a great question for engineers. Once they've got a good handle on things, they'll start imagining ways to solve the problem. They'll come up with all kinds of ideas, and some that might even seem a little crazy. That's important because sometimes the craziest idea is the one that works best. After coming up with these ideas, they'll pick a few that make the most sense. Next, they'll start drawing a plan. Depending on the idea, the plan can be very simple or very complicated. But the important part is the plan itself. A good plan helps engineers focus on what they're making and, most importantly, why. Now the engineers get to have some real fun. They get to create something. It's important to stick to the plan, though, so the idea doesn't go too far off course. Once they've built it, then they have to test it. Experimentation is very important because it's here that engineers learn what works and, well, what doesn't. And while it's great when something goes right on the first try, it's actually good when things don't, because that gives engineers a chance to go back and improve on their original idea. And improve they will until they've solved the problem. So the next time you've got a problem to solve, whether simple or complicated, there's probably a team of engineers ready to create something to solve it. And nobody solves engineering problems quite like NASA.
This is the way they settled things in the Old West, with sudden impact. But this isn't 1866. It's 1966. And I'll tell you something. You separate fact from fancy, and you'll find far more impact in the modern world than back in the days of wooden sidewalks and watering troughs. Back then, Jenny Lind appearing at the Opera House was a once-in-a-lifetime affair. Hamlin's Wizard Oil, a miracle drug, cures all pains in man or beast. The general store was the focal point of community activity. But this is another century. Entertainment, television, radio, motion pictures, stage shows, they all compete for our attention. Miracle drugs? Why, the list is endless. And they do work miracles. The Cracker Barrel has given way to the supermarket, the stagecoach to the jetliner. We're surrounded by a sea of wonderful products to buy, each made more appealing by modern merchandising and salesmanship. And that's the point. In a world crammed with impact, your voice has to be heard over all others. And so, welcome to Impact 66. Our theme, put more impact into our selling. And we're here to explore ways to suck home an idea, an advantage, a feature. Not just knowing an advantage, not just saying it, but putting genuine enthusiasm and fire into it, smacking it home so it stays remembered, making something come alive and be important. That's why today, in this once-a-year merchandising rally, we use the big screen. We move around. We dig under sheet metal and generalities to get at the heart of what we have to sell. Impact 66 brings you facts, demonstrations, ammunition for each of your 5 different lines of cars and full line of trucks. Your products are loaded with impact, but you have to pull the trigger. Watch. Just like that. And you know something? Your prospects expect and want you to use showmanship and enthusiasm when you sell. Oh, speaking of showmanship, let's see the kind of impact automobile stunt drivers put into their exhibitions.
This is Chrissy Katamaki, speaking for Chevrolet and your line of 66 products.
The place? The GM Proving Grounds, Milford, Michigan. The event? The 1966 Thrill of the Year demonstration program. The top cars in the industry, driven by the best drivers in the business. Joey Chitwood and his Hell drivers, plus the drivers from the proving grounds. And now, a pulse-quickening demonstration of precision control. Watch how built-in Chevy handling teams up with split-second timing. You can almost hear those bumpers click. It's that close. That is real ride control. How does your 396 cubic inch power plant stack up against the 409? Well, let's pit them in a quarter-mile drag from a standing start. The winner, your 396. The top speed, 92 1/10 miles per hour. That's moving. And so is this. Now, a punishing test of transmission and drive components. The rock cycle. A real torture test. Here's a look at the Turbo Titan 3, a multi-fuel turbine engine. A 6-speed automatic transmission, astronaut seats, twin dial steering in place of a steering wheel. The truck of the future, operational today. What happens when a front tire blows at 90 miles an hour? Let's find out. Perfect control, basic built-in stability. How fast can the sizzling SS396 go with 360 horses and a 1/4 mile from a standing start? The top speed, 103 5/10 miles per hour. Next, Corvette, flat out on a high-speed run. Here it comes, and there it goes. Top speed, 151 3/10 miles per hour. That's moving. Next up, a rugged test of suspension, frame, and chassis. Here goes. The toughest chassis design in Chevrolet's history. Yes, sir, your 1966 Chevrolet's in action. Showmanship on wheels. And salesmanship, too. All through the year and all over the country, Chevrolets travel the thrill show circuit, creating a strong image of rugged performance. These are the cars you're selling today. 66 models right off the showroom floor.
Now on signal from Joey Chitwood, it's action. Drivers to their cars. In true Indianapolis tradition, gentlemen, start your engines. Precision artistry and high-speed action, the ultimate in control as they utilize the full width, length of the stretch, scissoring high side low and low side high. It's high-speed touch and go, striking elevations, changing sequence over elevations 1, 2, and 3, high and low, low and high. An occasional tap of the brake and frequent bursts from those high-performance engines, utilizing both for control and safety. Now taking a car up on 2 wheels and holding, maintaining that point of balance. Now the X1 space rocket propulsion shot. Tolerances here involved in 1.5 inches on either side as they enter the breach area of the X1-2. Joey Jr. behind the wheel makes his way around the raceway. That critical moment approaches the breach area. He's in. Slamming down. The sights, the sounds that spell excitement. Thrill shows that feature 1966 Chevrolets. Thrill shows that keep selling all year long.
That's quite a show, isn't it? And a lot more people are going to see the Joey Chitwood Thrill Show this year than ever before. About 10 million pairs of eyes will see it, because it's going to be shown as an action-packed short subject on big motion picture screens across the country. It's starting its run right now in first-run theaters. Now, this kind of action is one way to present 1966 Chevrolets with impact. Of course, you're not about to give your prospects a demo ride on 2 wheels or take a few ramp jumps. But isn't it true that you want your prospects to feel the full impact of your product? Now let's take an excursion behind the scenes and see the lengths to which advertising men go to put impact into your television commercials. Here at Fort Macon, Georgia, a brand new Chevrolet commercial is being filmed. A crew of 26 men and literally tons of equipment have been brought in. The crew will labor for 8 solid days to shoot 2 minutes of film. The script calls for a Chevrolet to be assembled right before your eyes without a human hand touching it. Can do? Yes, sirree. These fellas can do practically anything. Parts of a specially prepared car are suspended on invisible wires, and the car is pulled apart, piece by piece. Later, the motion picture film will be run backwards, so the parts appear to fly onto the car, as you'll see in a moment. The script also calls for parts of the car to come flying off a tree, while still others are to rise from the ocean. Oh, those script writers. For the final scene, an explosives expert has been brought in to plant charges of dynamite throughout another specially prepared car. All set? Cameras rolling? Fire! Now let's look at it as it was recently seen on Bonanza in 23 million American homes.
What you're watching now is the beginning. The beginning of one of the most exciting things that will happen this year. The beginning of a 1966 Chevrolet.
There it is, a lively, impact-filled commercial that will have plenty of people wondering how it was done. But you know the secret. 26 men working 8 solid days to make it. Well, that sure seems like going to a lot of trouble just for 2 minutes on TV, doesn't it? But what better way to dramatize all of the exciting elements that are fused together to make a 1966 Chevrolet? As a salesman, I'm sure you go to a lot of trouble, too. Digging into all of the many features you have so that you can blend the right combination of them together into a sale. Hours of work focused right down into minutes of selling. But that's what it takes today. Now, let's get back to some of those product features that you have to sell. How much digging have you done under the hood? Are you in a position to do full justice to a power plant as advanced, as efficient, as revolutionary as the 396? Do you have enough facts to fuse together a portrait of power that will sell? Watch.
And here it is. The sensation-making 396 cubic inch turbojet V8, Chevrolet's big engine for 1966. The biggest thing about it is an ingenious new design of exhaust and intake valve ports that really does something for engine breathing. Breathing is just as important to an engine as it is to a person. The easier it breathes, the more power, pep, and economy you're going to have. In older type engines like this one, breathing is restricted by sharp bends in the manifold passageways and in the design of the valves. But in the 396, Chevrolet's new aircraft-type valve system and special port design produce straighter passageways, making it easier for the fuel mixture to get in, the exhaust gases to get out. Everything about this engine contributes to its greater efficiency. The way the valve stems protrude from the head at precisely calculated angles, which is the reason they call it a porcupine head. The bigger air filter, 40% more area. It's a terrific engine, and it's available in both 396 and 427 cubic inch displacement. And here's something else. Your special high-performance engines carry the same Chevrolet warranty as your other Chevrolet engines, while Fords and Plymouths have only a limited warranty. Your performance engines cost less than Ford engines of comparable power and equipment. Your engines have the axles to go with them to get the most out of them. This is the most advanced engine offered in any production line automobile this year. So now let's see it in the only way that an engine should be seen, in action. So open up your mind to the full opportunity before you and sell power in 66. Sell the new 6, the smoothest operating 6 you ever saw. Sell the 283 V8, the most popular V8 ever built. Sell the 327, more power this year. Sell that sensational new deep-breathing 396. Sell it in all 3 blazing power options, 325 to 375 horsepower. Sell the red-hot, power-punching 427, the street version at 390 horsepower, and the high-performance 427 with solid lifters at 425 horsepower. In 1966, your big story is engines. Demonstrate and sell. Sell the full range of Chevrolet power and performance in 1966.
Yes, sir. Whatever people want under the hood, you can give it to them. From all-out economy to all-out performance. You have the finest engine lineup in the industry. Now let's dig a little deeper into some of the many product advantages you have in Chevrolet cars and trucks over competition. But first, a word about the things that you're about to see. They're all based on cold fact. Fact turned up by extensive product testing. We brought a number of cars and trucks of all makes and models to the desert proving grounds in Mesa, Arizona. Our report to you is based strictly on what the engineers uncovered. But instead of confining ourselves to raw facts and figures, we're going to give them to you with a little showmanship to add impact. So, with Superstition Mountain and its fable of the lost Dutchman gold mine looming up out of the desert, let's start off with another fable, one that's been going around recently, a fable about a car, someone else's car. Here's a little song about it.
It wasn't so long ago in the history of man's voyage toward a better world that ships were carrying eager passengers toward the shores of a new nation that was just in the building. Our forefathers were constructing the foundation of this nation by interlocking inseparably the blocks of our political and economic freedoms. Life our forefathers established on this foundation of freedoms drew people from the far corners of the earth. And all those who set foot on these shores had the opportunity to build a better life for themselves. Even young Jonathan, an unskilled lad from across the sea, hoped to find a job where he could progress according to his ability and enterprise. As the years passed, Jonathan's earnings increased. But he still felt that for a man of his skill, it was about time for another raise.
Mr. Blessgravy, am I not the best crown rounder and brim trimmer in ye business?
Mm-hmm.
Then verily, methinks I am worth more moolah.
That you are, Jonathan. I'm sorry, lad.
No raise, Mr. Blessgravy? I quit. Sales and profits down. Phooey, I could run ye business better myself. Hey, why not? My own business. All you need's a little capital, a little push, and an idea. Yeah, an idea. Let's see.
So I said to him, I wouldn't wear that hat to a dog fight. Why, there isn't a decent hat in the entire village. And such prices. Imagine paying that much for a poke bonnet. Why, it was an awful thing.
Why not? Women's hats. My own business.
Fortunately, Jonathan was thrifty enough to keep a little nest egg for such an emergency. Well, the cost of the building took care of the nest egg. And there was nothing left to pay for the necessary tools and equipment. But happily, Jonathan had a good reputation. And as his idea promised a profit, his friends and neighbors were willing to invest some of their savings in his new business. In the nick of time, an enterprising chap showed up with the raw materials to make hats. And before long, Jonathan was open for business. First, he had to advertise.
Shop at Bonton, it's the spot. 12 new hat styles, that's a lot. Ladies, get that new hat drill. 30 days to pay your bill.
As an expert salesman, Jonathan demonstrated the superior style and quality of his product. He set a price for his creations that the consumer was willing to pay, and sales dollars poured in from satisfied customers. Jonathan had big dreams of the wonderful rewards of being in business for himself. But before he could buy what he wanted, his employees' wages had to be paid. He had to pay taxes. And his friends who helped finance the business had to be paid a return on their investment. When all of his bills were paid, Jonathan had to exchange his big dream for a little dream.
Mesdames, mademoiselles, it is the privilege of Alphonse, hat stylist to all the grand heads of Europe, to bring you hats with style so chic, a quality magnifique, and a price, ooh la la, so low. Come one, come all to the grand opening.
To meet competition, Jonathan had to plow part of his profits back into the business to develop a better hat. customers approved the quality, style, and price of Jonathan's new designs, he still could make his dreams come true. With the passing years, this strong foundation of freedoms protected the dignity of the individual and his family, gave everyone the right to worship as he pleased, and promised anyone with ability and enterprise the opportunity to participate in the building of the American way of life as we know it today. A way of life that depends upon millions of thrifty Americans who send a portion of their savings to work in our business system each year. People from all walks of life, workers, farmers, housewives, all of us send our dollars to work in our business system in the hope of earning dividends or interest on our investments. Anyone who has an insurance policy, a bank deposit, or a share of stock is helping to finance our business system. A constant stream of savings dollars must flow into big and small business each year. These dollars help to buy the land, the buildings, the tools and equipment, and create new job opportunities for our expanding population. The goods we produce are distributed to main streets all over the country. While the Main Street of today doesn't look much like the Main Street of Jonathan's time, the principles of our business system remain the same, for businessmen still compete with one another for the consumer's supply of spendable dollars. And Mrs. Consumer is still mighty critical of everything she buys.
Uh-oh, competition.
The management of every business has a continuing problem to improve their product to stay ahead of competition, or else.
Okay, men, this is it. Quick Chill's got the ball. We've got to get it back. Give them that new product play. More style, better quality, new features, and at the right price. Hit the line, men. Let's go.
Micrometer, wrench, file, caliper, slide rule.
In addition to creating a better product, management develops new tools and more efficient methods to help workers turn out more boxes to sell at a price Mrs. Consumer will pay. Features about this better product are advertised to point out its competitive advantages.
The Auto Magic Permafreeze, with plenty of room for groceries galore. The Auto Magic Permafreeze, with the super duper store-o-matic door. Just press the button for your ice, a feature that is new, and extra space all over the place for other items too. In the Auto Magic Permafreeze, so see your dealer right away. Get a Permafreeze today.
Ah, yes, dear lady. Permafreeze is your kind of refrigerator. High quality at a low price.
Sales dollars from satisfied customers once again flow back to Permafreeze. A successful business must have enough sales dollars coming in to enable management to pay the expenses of doing business, such as salaries and wages, materials and supplies, research and product development, plant maintenance and repair. In addition to all of these bills, management has to pay taxes to local, state, and federal governments. Any money that's left over is known as profit. Wise management plows part of it back into the business. The remainder of the profit is paid out as dividends. These dividends are sent back to investors as a reward for risking their savings in the American business system. Although occasionally some of us pick a lemon and have to take a loss.
The constant investment of our savings through good times and bad has enabled our competitive business system to continue to increase the production of more and better goods to meet the demands of our rising population for a better standard of living.
For example, it was only a little more than half a century ago that the average worker had only inefficient tools to help him turn out a product. Low production meant low wages. In 1900, many men had to work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, to earn enough money to provide their families with the bare essentials. Hand labor was the rule in the home as well as the factory. In many families, the youngsters had to work to add their earnings to the family budget and forego the opportunity to get an education. And with most families in those days, the standard of living left much to be desired. A half-century later, we had invested enough in our business system to provide the average worker with efficient and expensive buildings and machinery to enable him to produce enough in a 40-hour week to earn twice as much as the 1900 worker earned in a 60-hour week. This shorter work week gives us all more leisure time to enjoy a standard of living beyond the wildest dreams of anyone who lived a half-century ago. The more we earn, the more our families have to spend for the things they need and want. Young people today have leisure time for fun and enjoy educational opportunities denied their fathers and grandfathers. And fortunately, we have been able to raise our standard of living without sacrificing the spiritual side of life, which means so much to the American family. Our business system has continued to provide a better life for our increasing population, in spite of destructive forces which have pounded against our foundation of freedoms with no avail. However, wars, or the threat of wars, interrupt the normal operations of our competitive business system and may result in government controls which crack essential blocks in our foundation of freedoms. In World War II, wages were controlled. Many workers were frozen to their jobs. Farm prices were controlled. And profits of business were limited. Raw materials were allocated between essential and non-essential business. On Main Street, USA, many of us found less to buy because a good portion of our productive capacity went to the war effort. Prices were fixed, and the available supply of goods was rationed. In war emergencies, we allow government to restrict certain of our freedoms. But we Americans have learned to remove government controls as quickly as possible and to repair the blocks in the foundation of our freedoms to allow our business system to resume its normal operations. While we invest part of our savings to help finance the world's most efficient business system, at the same time we pay taxes to government to finance many kinds of services, which also contribute to our way of life. For example, our taxes must provide the necessary funds to improve and expand our school system. Our taxes must be sufficient to pay for city streets, health, fire, and police protection. and, of course, aid to the needy. Our state taxes help pay for highways, educational institutions, and, among other things, help to finance important experiments to increase the productivity of our farms. Our federal taxes pay for irrigation and reclamation projects, for national parks, postal services, the Weather Bureau, and many other services. Our taxes have to pay for the enormous cost of past wars and provide the funds for a defense program which will ensure the safety of our country. In addition, all of us should be willing to pay whatever taxes are necessary to enable efficient government to improve or expand any essential service. But with our present tax load, we should avoid pressuring government for any new services that aren't absolutely necessary. Because we all know the more our government provides, the more taxes it's forced to collect. None of us can escape. Big business. Small business. Farmers. Workers. Housewives, and all of us have to pay our share. Demanding more and more from government could create a tax burden heavy enough to crack essential blocks in the foundation of our business system. Therefore, we shouldn't let our taxes reach a point where they destroy our ability to save and invest. For, as we have seen, our rising standard of living depends upon a constant flow of savings dollars into our business system each year. In the future of our country, waves of destructive forces will continue to batter against our foundation. When any force weakens the interlocked blocks of our political and economic freedoms, as good citizens, we must be quick to use the tools our Constitution gives us and repair any cracks that may appear. As long as we keep the foundation of our business system strong, we shall be able to maintain and improve the way of life our forefathers conceived and established. A way of life which gave everyone who came to this country the chance to progress according to his ability and enterprise. Like the youth of yesterday, the young people of today deserve the same opportunity to earn success and accomplishment. And on this foundation of freedoms, continue to build a better life for themselves and their fellow man in the world of tomorrow.
Once upon a time, in a certain little town, on a street that had beautiful poplar trees growing along each side of it, was a nice little house. Johnny, who had brown eyes, ears that stood out a little like this, a nose that turned up slightly, that always had a happy smile. I said the mouth always had a happy smile. That's better. Now, as well as having a head, of course, arms and legs and a body, just like other little boys. And when they were all put together, Johnny looked like this. Well, now that you know what Johnny looks like, I know you'll want to hear about a very peculiar thing that happened to him one day. The sun was peeping in his window and was getting ready to wake him up. But look at that sun. He looks a bit disgusted at what he sees in Johnny's room. And no wonder. We didn't want to tell you this, but Johnny's a terribly untidy little boy. Did you ever see such an untidy room? His mother had asked him so many times to hang up his clothes and put away his toys. And like all little boys, he had a good self who told him the right things to do. And he knew he should hang up his pajamas. But like most little boys, Johnny also had a bad self. And I don't know why, but Johnny seemed to prefer to listen to this bad self, who told him,
"Don't be a sissy. Throw your pajamas on the floor."
And the bad self won. Too bad. Now, of course, the bathroom's nice and clean and tidy. Johnny's mother keeps it that way. But does Johnny help her? Well, not exactly. Johnny But his good self tells him he knows he doesn't have to have fun that way. It makes his mother very unhappy. And good self might have won his argument if that bad self had not come up with the old argument.
"Ah, don't be a sissy," he told Johnny. "Make all the mess you want. And why? Just splash a little water on yourself and dry it off. Nobody'll know the difference. And what's the good of cleaning your teeth? Unless, of course, you could have some fun with the toothpaste."
But wait, cried good self. Stop. Just look at the mess you've made. You'll get worse and worse. If you don't mend your ways, you'll turn into a pig for sure. Just as your mother said. Pig, snorted Johnny. Ah, don't be silly. But even as he hurried off to breakfast, his hands and feet became little pig's trotters. And though good self knew this was bound to happen, he was very sad to see such a nice little boy making such a pig of himself. Of course, bad self was just tickled pink, another one over on him. As Johnny rushed into breakfast, he had no idea that his hands and feet were, you know what. But then why should he? With table manners like this. His mother, of course, was most unhappy to see him slurp and spill his food this way. But Johnny paid no attention to what she said. He thought he was a regular fellow. He had the mistaken idea that being neat and well-mannered was like being a sissy. That was why when his good self popped up to remind him that all this bad behavior was going to lead nowhere, Johnny gave him an argument. "Ah," said Johnny. And of course no polite little boy says "ah" in just that way. "Ah, I don't want to be polite. I want to be a ball player or a soldier." "Well, you won't be either one," said good self. "You'll just be a pig." This pig business was beginning to worry Johnny, and for a moment he began to wonder if he'd better change his ways.
"Don't be silly,"
said bad self, popping into the picture again.
"What does it matter how you eat as long as you eat plenty to make you strong?"
Now that sort of reasoning seemed to appeal to Johnny, and he continued to eat as rudely as ever. "Be careful," said good self. "You're going too far."
"Ah, hurry up,"
said bad self.
"Show him you're boss around here."
Then Johnny licked his plate and wiped his mouth with his sleeve. "He's getting to be more and more of a pig," murmured good self. This, of course, was just what bad self wanted. He knew he could get Johnny into even worse trouble if he could just get good self out of the way. "Look out!" Too late. As soon as Johnny got outside the house, he ran as fast as he could to the baseball field. And as he approached the field, he saw that the game had already started. This made him very angry because his bad manners and his rudeness had, quite naturally, made him also a very selfish little boy. "Give me the bat," he said to Tommy. "I want to bat first." The other boys could hardly believe that one of their friends could be such a bad sport and such a bully. "Don't be a pig," they called. "See, even your friends think you're a pig," said good self. "And no wonder. Snatching the bat away from little Tommy is the most terrible thing you've done yet."
"Ah, why not take the bat?"
shouted bad self.
"You're bigger than he is, aren't you?"
"Right," said Johnny the pig. "Let's get on with the game." But the tale doesn't end here. "Play ball!" shouted Johnny. Mickey threw a fast one. Wham! and the ball sailed through the air. As Johnny ran, touched first base, and rushed on, the ball was thrown into Billy, who caught it on second base. "You're out," shouted Billy. And Johnny was out by a mile. But Johnny didn't like that. He didn't want to be out. I'm not out," he screamed at Billy. Poor Billy just blinked. Anybody could see that Johnny was out by a mile. Billy started to explain it, but he just got pushed around for his trouble. Well, that was more than the other boys could stand. They were all good sports, and like all regular fellows, they couldn't stand a bully or someone who wanted his own way all the time. They told Johnny he was a big bully. "You're nothing but a pig," they said. Naturally, they wouldn't have anything more to do with him. "Would you?" "Humph," said Johnny. "They all say I'm a pig. They're crazy." That's what Johnny said. But do you think they were crazy? Bad Self laughed and laughed as he saw what he'd done to Johnny. Good Self decided it was time to do something about it. As for Johnny, he began to feel pretty unhappy. All his friends had left him, and he had that empty feeling that everyone gets when they've been terribly selfish. There was nothing for him to do but go home. On his way, he passed a farmyard where there were some little pigs. He couldn't stand the sight of them. He hurried on his way. He had no idea, of course, the pigs were following him until, "Oink, oink," they said right behind him. "Shoo, shoo," said Johnny to the pigs. Go on home." But the little pigs just stood there and smiled at him. They thought this was fun. They'd never seen a pig with clothes on. Johnny was pretty worried by this time, so he started to run. The pigs ran right behind him. So he ran faster. And the faster Johnny ran, the faster the pigs ran. So Johnny ran still faster. He'd never run so fast before. Puffing and blowing, he arrived at last at his home, swung in the gate, and slammed it shut. Only then did he feel safe from those terrifying little pigs. In the garden, he found his little dog Rover, lying asleep under a bush, waiting for him. Johnny smiled again. Let his friends call him a pig. Let them walk away from him. Rover was a true friend. Rover wouldn't let him down. "Hi, Rover," he called. The dog awakened as soon as he heard that familiar sound. "Oh, boy," said Rover to himself. "Johnny's here to play with me." And off he ran to greet his little master. "Whoa," said Rover. "What is that funny-looking thing that sounds like Johnny?" Rover decided he didn't know. But whatever it was, he didn't like it. He ran like a flash with howls of dismay, sped like a rocket toward the bushes, and disappeared. Cautiously, he peeped out and blinked. Johnny tried hard to stop a tear from rolling down his cheek. This was the hardest blow of all. Little Rover, whom he'd raised from a pup, with whom he'd romped and played for years, had deserted him. He could stand everything else, but this was too much. He would have to find his mother. Would she run away from him? He'd been very rude and very disobedient. Yes, he'd better see his mother. On the way through the hall, Johnny passed the mirror. Huh? Who was that? Who was that funny-looking creature? He looked at it this way, he looked at it that way, and he looked at it the other way. "It's me, Sovereign Catfish! Ma!" he yelled. Now he really had to find his mother quickly. "Oh, Mother," he said, "I've turned into a pig. No one will have anything to do with me, not even Rover. Oh, Mother, I've turned into a pig." "Well, of course you have," said his mother. "You've turned into a pig because you preferred to act like one." "I didn't want to be a pig," said Johnny. I just don't want to be a sissy." "So that's it," his mother said. "You're afraid of being a sissy. Well, just let me show you something." And she turned on the movie projector. "Do you know who those men are?" asked Johnny's mother. "Sure, they're West Point cadets," answered Johnny. "That's right. And see how smartly they march. Notice how clean and well-kept their uniforms are. Do you think they're sissies?" "Well, no," Johnny agreed they couldn't be sissies. Then said his mother, "If the future generals of the United States can keep clean, you should too." Johnny thought about that and agreed it was probably so. But he added, "If I had a uniform like that and were a West Point cadet, I would naturally keep myself clean." "Mm-mm," said his mother. Things like that just don't happen. These young men earned the right to be cadets by being clean and well-mannered first. You can't change from being dirty and bad-mannered into being clean and well-mannered all of a sudden. You can't? And Johnny seemed worried. Well, said his mother, if you made up your mind to try very hard, perhaps you could. In the academy and the barracks rooms where they live, the cadets study hard and practice being orderly, clean, and tidy. These young men know that without good manners, they will never be good officers. And it's the same thing at Annapolis, where Uncle Sam trains his naval officers. Nobody leans on the table or slurps his food here. Here's the Navy football squad. But good manners are not forgotten on the playing field. The men learn to tackle hard and to tackle fairly. And how to kick. And how to develop their muscles. But they also learn that while it is important to win, it doesn't matter if they lose as long as they've played their best and can lose with a smile. Watch this man score. And remember that good sportsmanship is something that everyone admires. And good sportsmanship is acting to others the way you would like them to act to you. So remember, Johnny, if you want to play ball like this and get a cheer like this, play fair. Play for the team and never, never act like a pig. Oh, boy, said Johnny. That was a wonderful movie. Now I know exactly what to do. Well, said his mother, now's the time to begin then. Because once you've made up your mind to do something, you must act immediately. As Johnny rushed away, you could see that he felt better already. He ran up the stairs as fast as he could and entered his room. No wonder I turned into a pig, he said as he looked around. Quickly, he gathered up all his clothes he'd left scattered around and hung them up neatly in his closet, just as he'd seen the cadets do. Then he picked up and put away his toys in the toy box. On the way out, he paused at the door to see if everything was shipshape, as the midshipman would say. And as he looked around the clean and tidy room, he felt happier than he'd ever felt before. Suddenly, he noticed that his pig's trotters were once more his own hands and feet. Oh, boy, he exclaimed. I'm turning into a little boy again. And he was so encouraged that he hurried even faster to get on with the job. In the bathroom, he hung up each towel in its place, put everything back where it belonged, and yes, sir, he even put the cap back on the toothpaste. Yes, sir, said Johnny. I must admit that certainly is an improvement. So he thought it was time to see if he showed any improvement. And sure enough, he could see a lot of changes for the better. Now, nothing could stop him. A fella couldn't become a cadet or a midshipman all of a sudden. He wondered why he hadn't realized that before. At lunchtime, Johnny sat up straight at the table as he'd been taught to do, arranged his napkin properly, and instead of reaching for the food, asked his mother to pass it for him. This time there was no slurping or spilling or splashing of food. Johnny was eating like a little gentleman and proud of the fact that he knew how to do so. Johnny, said Good Self, popping up again, you look more and more like yourself. Johnny grinned as he wiped his mouth with a napkin. Just remember, continued Good Self, that any drip can be a pig. It takes a smart guy not to be one. Roger, said Johnny. And what do you know? His pig's ears disappeared.
Don't be a dope,
cried Bad Self.
You're gonna have more fun taking my advice. Do you want to be a sissy?
Being polite and well-mannered is not being a sissy, said Johnny. Listening to you doesn't get a fella anywhere. And he dropped Bad Self into the sugar bowl. Good for you, cried Good Self as Johnny excused himself and left the table. And just in case Bad Self should cause any more trouble, he jumped on the lid and sat on it. Well, said Good Self, that takes care of that. And it certainly seemed to. When Johnny arrived at the ball game, the boys were not a bit pleased to see him. Hi, fellas, said Johnny. But the fellas hardly said a word. The boys expected trouble. But Johnny went over to little Tommy and said, "Here, use my new bat." Then he went over to Jimmy and said, "Here, try my new mitt." "Well, what do you make of it?" Ted asked Bobby. "I don't know," answered Bobby. "But if he wants to play fair, we'll let him play." As the game got going, the boys were more than glad to have Johnny playing with them. He was always on the job, and he played for the team. But when it came Johnny's turn at bat, a shiver of excitement ran through all the boys. So far, Johnny'd been a good sport. How would he act now? The ball came sailing fast and straight toward the plate. Bam! Johnny socked it with all his might, and the ball went winging way, way, way over the field. It looked like a home run for sure. Johnny went zipping around the bases, and as he passed third base, the ball was fielded. The fielder fumbled with it for a moment, then threw it into home base. And Johnny and the ball seemed to arrive at the same moment. "You're out," shouted Jimmy in great excitement. And this time the boys were ready in case Johnny put up another argument. But they didn't know our new Johnny. "Shake," said Johnny to Jimmy. "That was a good catch. I thought I was safe, but I was too busy running to see. If you say I'm out, I'm out." That's the kind of sportsmanship the boys like to see. And they were so happy to see Johnny a good sport again, they cheered him all around the field. And because he was, they then and there elected him captain of the team. Well, of course, there was no pig left in Johnny, so his snout disappeared, too. "Hooray for our side," said Goodself. "I knew you'd do it." Then Johnny home as fast as he could go, leaped over the garden fence and found Rover waiting for him. Good old Rover was overjoyed after looking like a man, and grinning as only a dog can grin, followed Johnny as he'd always done. "Mother, Mother," called Johnny as he came bounding into the house. "What is it?" she said. "I just want to tell you," said Johnny, "that it's
For him, it was the dream and the culmination of a lifetime. His name was Joseph Strauss. His title, Chief Engineer, Golden Gate Bridge and Highway District. Joseph Strauss is the man who led a corps of creative engineers and a legion of rugged men in designing and building the Golden Gate Bridge. Few people remember today, but for 15 years before the steel was formed for the Golden Gate Bridge, it was regarded by many as the bridge that could not be built. In 1918, the city engineer of San Francisco approached Joseph Strauss, then a consulting engineer with a long list of bridge contracts to his credit. The city engineer asked if a bridge could be built across the Golden Gate at a reasonable cost. After 3 years of study, Strauss replied that it could for $27 million. This was in 1921. Such a bridge was an obvious need. San Francisco Bay formed a 50-mile-long barrier to highway traffic in the San Francisco area. And the entrance from the sea, known as the Golden Gate, separated the growing city on the south from the lightly populated and excellent recreation areas of Marin County. While a bridge was an obvious need, it was not an obvious possibility. The challenge was not to bridge a river or a valley, but an arm of the ocean. The proposed bridge was this one, impressive in its simplicity, modern in its concept. The center span from tower to tower would be 4,200 feet long, the longest ever attempted in that time. The side spans would each be 1,125 feet long. The roadway would be some 250 feet above the choppy waters of the bay. That was how matters stood in 1921. 11 years of stormy controversy followed. The opponents raised many objections. Some said the bridge couldn't possibly be built. Other critics said the bridge would cost an exorbitant sum, almost $100 million. And to a city that remembered a disastrous earthquake, there was an ominous note. The bridge would be only a few miles from the San Andreas Fault. The battle was fought vigorously in the courts and in the newspaper columns. But the dreamers and the builders won out. Construction began officially on January 5th, 1933. The film you're about to see is old, but these flickering scenes still portray the story of building this great bridge. In the fabricating shops of the Bethlehem Steel Company at Pottstown and Steelton, Pennsylvania, the fabrication work begins. Bethlehem, the major contractor, will build the steel towers and suspended span of the bridge. Huge sections, formed and temporarily assembled at the shops, are disassembled and shipped by rail to the Philadelphia docks. It takes miles of railroad cars to carry the steel for the towers and suspended span. At Philadelphia, the sections are loaded aboard ships of Bethlehem's Kalmar Line for the long trip to San Francisco by way of the Panama Canal. And finally, through the Golden Gate into San Francisco Bay. The steelwork is unloaded at Bethlehem's facilities at Alameda, across the bay from San Francisco. Here, the sections of the bridge are stored to be shipped out to the construction site in sequence. Fabricating the steelwork and transporting it to Alameda will extend over a period of almost 4 years. This scene was taken during the erection of the roadway. These members are only a fraction of the nearly 70,000 tons of steel that Bethlehem fabricated for the bridge. At the Golden Gate, construction begins with the Marin Pier, which is built on bedrock on the North Shore, the work being protected by a sheet piling cofferdam. When the last of the concrete has been poured on the North Pier, its surface is ground to a true plane. This is to ensure that the steel superstructure will start true and plumb. The surface is made plane to within less than 1/32 of an inch. The towers, which will be erected on each pier, are identical. 702 feet of steel rising to an elevation of 746 feet above sea level. 2 legs joined together by 6 cross braces. The legs are 90 feet apart on centers. Clearance between the legs at deck level is 60 feet, the width of the 6-lane roadway. When the bridge is completed, there will be no other structure this tall between San Francisco and New York City. First step in erecting the North Tower is the assembly of the erection traveler, which will climb upwards between the legs of the tower, building as it goes. When the traveler derricks are ready, the 5-inch thick steel base plates are placed by precise measurement. The steel sections arrive on a carefully planned schedule. At this time, Bethlehem's Fabricated Steel Construction Division is known as the McClintock Marshall Corporation. Moving the steel from storage at Alameda to the bridge site is a sizable effort in logistics. The distance is 5 miles across the open water of the bay. The obstacles to navigation are wind, tide, storm, and the famous San Francisco fog. To avoid delays in erection whenever bad weather prevents deliveries, a small storage area is prepared at the tower site to hold enough materials for several days' work. The lowermost sections of the tower are anchored to vertical steel angles, which have their roots 53 feet below the surface of the pier. these angles are pre-stressed before riveting to the tower legs, so they will exert a downward pull on the tower, a safeguard against the stresses of wind and earthquake. As the year 1933 unfolds, the Marin Tower climbs toward the roadway level. Even in this early stage, there appears the beauty of line that will make the Golden Gate Bridge famous. As the erection traveler raises itself on the lower tower sections, its spider-like shape stands out against the water. Each of its two electric-powered stiff-leg derricks is rated at 85 tons, about the weight of the heaviest tower section. The booms are 90 feet long. Once the traveler clears the pier by a sufficient margin, the workmen begin erection of the first diagonal brace. And so the technique of building the tower proves its workability. As the tower progresses upward, the traveler erects the tower legs, then raises itself and builds the braces behind it. Each time the traveler is raised, its weight must first be shifted to catheads placed atop the tower legs. Then the four plungers which support the traveler are withdrawn from reinforced slots in the tower legs. The traveler, moving upwards in about 10 minutes, gains another 40 feet of headway on the towers. One red-hot rivet coming up, special delivery to men working by the light of miners' lamps inside the tower. The riveters work on double platform scaffolding, driving simultaneously on several levels. $600,000 field rivets will be needed to complete each of the towers. One writer will later describe the towers of the Golden Gate Bridge as riveter's paradise. And so the work continues, and a new form rises against the sky in the beautiful Bay Area, a form which fits well in a land of massive hills and spans of water, but which dwarfs the men who are building it. In time, the only practical way up and down this open skyscraper is by elevator, and it's a sensational ride. By 1934, the legs of the North Tower are some 500 feet above the water, about 50 stories high. From bottom to top, the cellular principle of construction remains the same. Plates of steel riveted to angles, forming a beehive of cells. This construction principle creates a maze of passages in which men will occasionally become lost for short periods. But it is a principle which helps explain the immense strength of the two towers. As the year 1934 unfolds, a bold silhouette rises above the Golden Gate. The horizontal cross struts above the roadway level will help the tower legs act as a unit in resisting lateral forces. For the top of each tower leg, there is a massive cable saddle cast at Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Each saddle is a three-piece steel casting. They are mounted on rollers to allow movement during erection of the span. Later, they will be fixed in position. Placing the cable saddles in November 1934 essentially completes the North Tower. However, long before the first tower reaches completion, workmen across the bay begin building the second concrete pier for the South or San Francisco Tower. The San Francisco Pier and fender wall were built 1,125 feet offshore in 100 feet of rushing tidewater, silencing the critics who regarded this as the Achilles heel of the bridge. But the work didn't go without incident. A steamer, groping in the fog, demolished 400 feet of the trestle, which led from the shore to the pier site. The trestle was rebuilt. Later, a storm took out 800 feet of it. At such times, the people who said the bridge couldn't be built sounded as if they might be right. But a new trestle went up, and the work continued. All things considered, this pier and fender wall represent one of the most difficult underwater construction feats ever attempted. The pier was successfully completed in January of 1935. It took about a year and a half. On January 10th, 1935, the San Francisco Tower is begun. The traveler Derrick, lowered from the North Tower, is reassembled on the second pier and begins another climb skyward. As the tower progresses upward, Kalmar Line ships continue their deliveries of fabricated steelwork to Alameda. The pattern of erecting the San Francisco Tower is the same as that used in building the Marin Tower. The San Francisco Tower is completed by late June, 104 days ahead of schedule. On November 11th, 1935, the task of spinning the two great cables is begun. From then on, the Golden Gate is steadily bridged wire by wire. The workmen of the cable contractor stitched the north and south shores together with 80,000 miles of wire. Each wire measures just under 1/5 of an inch in diameter, slightly smaller than a lead pencil. Spinning carriages shuttle from anchorage to midspan, playing out as many as 6 wires on each trip. The cables, when completed, will weigh 22,000 tons apiece. It's interesting to note that each cable weighs approximately as much as each tower. The wires, 27,572 of them per cable, build up to a compacted cable slightly over 3 feet in diameter. Later, as the roadway takes shape, the cables will be wrapped with galvanized wire and painted to protect them against the elements. The spinning of the cables is completed in May of 1936. Bethlehem, builder of the towers, begins erecting the suspended span on June 18th. The engineering problems in erecting the roadway were challenging. The main span was the longest ever attempted, 4,200 feet from tower to tower, with side spans of 1,125 feet. As every engineer knows, there was the delicate problem of making sure that the 2 sections of roadway moving out from each tower would meet at the center within exacting tolerances. The entire span would be constructed from elementary structural forms. The stiffening truss panels would consist of top and bottom chords, diagonals, and verticals. The verticals are spaced at 25-foot intervals. Suspender strands occur at every other vertical. The truss measures 28 feet deep. The roadway floor beams are 8.5 feet deep, 87 feet long, and weigh, on the average, 23 tons each. Generally speaking, the floor beams occur at each vertical in the stiffening trusses. Roadway stringers atop the floor beams carry the 60-foot roadway. Knee braces tie in the floor beams and bottom cords. The summer of 1936 sees the first 3 panels erected by cantilevering each way from the towers. Chicago booms at the roadway level handle the steel for this work. One of the unique features of the job is the emphasis placed on safety. As the roadway moves outward from each tower, a manila rope safety net is introduced. Assembled first at water level, the net and its frame are lifted to position beneath the span. As erection proceeds, additional sections of net will be positioned, always in advance of the workmen. Eventually, the net will extend the entire length of the bridge. Also, the net reaches some 10 feet beyond the width of the span on each side. As erection proceeds, the first 3 panels of roadway are planked over. The steelwork is delivered from Alameda to the base of the towers, then hoisted to this planked over area. From there, the steel members move out on a buggy to the point of construction. After the first 3 panels are planked over, the balance of the span erection is handled by traveler derricks. In the erection of the trusses, 2 25-foot panels are cantilevered forward, assembled piece by piece. The first vertical is joined to the projecting bottom cord. The diagonals are then erected, followed by the top cord. And so the span progresses, moving out truss by truss in 4 directions to maintain equal loading on the cables and towers. When each set of 2 truss panels is connected to the suspenders, the floor beams are swung into place. These will be followed by reinforcing laterals and some of the roadway stringers. The net proves to be a success. It saves 19 lives. There are many special provisions for the safety of the men during erection. For example, for protection against head injuries, the workmen wear hard hats. And whenever they can work with limited movement, the men use safety belts with tie-off lines. By fall of 1936, residents of San Francisco are treated to the sight of a span which moves steadily closer to the day when the 2 halves will meet. The partial loading of cables and towers gives the span an unnatural curvature. It looks as though the main span will meet at a peak. Bethlehem and the cable contractor work together to control the cable curvature and saddle movements. Soon, the erection gangs on the main span are within hailing distance. Then the safety nets meet. Finally, on November 18th, 1936, the closing members are lowered into place. The Golden Gate is bridged. For Chief Engineer Joseph Strauss And for every engineer who has contributed to the work, this is a day of realization, the type of day which fulfills the life of an engineer, first as a dream, then as a magnificent accomplishment. But the job is far from over. Painters apply the final coat, a special color prepared for this bridge, International Orange by name. The buggies bring out fabricated sections for the sidewalks and railings. These items, and the balance of the roadway stringers, are erected as the traveler derricks work their way back to the towers. Bethlehem Steel's role in building the bridge is coming to an end, a role that involved the fabrication and erection of close to 70,000 tons of steelwork. When the derricks and other structural tools are removed, the paving contractor installs and welds the reinforcing steel for the concrete roadway. This web of steel will transmit traffic loads to the stringers. Fog makes one of its regular visits as the finishing touches are added to the bridge, creating a strange kind of beauty. And so, the work is completed. The bridge that pessimists said could not be built has been built. May 28th, 1937. Opening day. Newspaper accounts vary on the amount of celebrating done by San Francisco. Some say 4 days, some say a week. It was a celebration worthy of the bridge. The fact that men who never saw a blueprint or drove a rivet were so deeply proud of the accomplishment proved that all men are builders at heart, conquerors of the impossible. But some men, the engineers, earn and cherish the privilege of doing the dreaming, the planning, the building. It was such men who designed and built the Golden Gate Bridge.
The United States Army presents The Big Picture, an official report produced for the armed forces and the American people. Guest narrator for this issue, Mr. Henry Fonda.
This man wears the uniform of the Special Forces. And to use the word special in describing him is no mistake, as you'll see during the next half hour. He's a mature, dedicated, and skillful professional, and his line of work is demanding. It takes in the full scope of unconventional or guerrilla operations. Special warfare involves three types of activity: unconventional warfare, psychological warfare, and counterinsurgency operations. And this last includes the complete range of military, political, economic, and sociological action. New emphasis is being placed on unconventional warfare, and the reason isn't hard to see. Today, the threat of war takes three forms: general nuclear war, conventional war, and guerrilla or unconventional war. Fortunately, the world has never yet seen a general nuclear war. Conventional warfare, the regular forces of two or more nations in combat, but without using nuclear weapons, we know all too well. But at the moment, no such traditional war is going on. Unconventional warfare is a different story. In a number of key spots around the world, intense guerrilla operations are underway right now. And it makes little difference to the people of a country whether they lose their freedom to an invading army of regulars or through the action of guerrilla forces sponsored by an outside power. Special forces, as such, are something fairly recent in American history, but our experience with this kind of operation goes back to our beginnings as a nation. Matter of fact, if you've got a nickel that's old enough, you can take a close-up look at one of the greatest guerrilla fighters the world has ever known. The American Indian taught us some painful lessons in this department. Of necessity, we learned them well. To live and move where the going was wild, to move fast and undetected, to become a part of the terrain, strike with stealth and silence and be gone before the enemy's conventional forces could react. In revolutionary times, Francis Marion's will-o'-the-wisp raiding earned him a title which has endured: the Swamp Fox. During the Civil War, General Morgan's Confederate guerrillas silently destroyed hundreds of miles of railway tracks, essential avenues of supply for Union forces, doing effective damage far beyond forces 10 times their number. During World War I, Lawrence of Arabia organized Arab guerrilla forces and led them to a successful defeat of the Turkish army. And throughout World War II, the Axis armies faced determined and effective opposition everywhere, as partisans in Russia, France, Greece, Yugoslavia, Italy, Poland, and elsewhere snarled communications, ambushed patrols, and cut supply lines. In France, the legendary Maquis was built up even while under the heel of occupation troops. And when the time came, its men were ready and organized for action. From D-Day on, these guerrilla forces were worth 15 divisions to the Allied effort, according to the Supreme Commander, General Dwight D. Eisenhower. In the Philippines, Japanese forces faced wiry and elusive guerrilla groups which operated from jungle and mountain, harassing the enemy and sending out a constant stream of intelligence information to our forces in the Pacific. Since World War II, guerrilla operations have flared up in dozens of places around the world. Recent headlines have spotlighted such areas as Laos, Vietnam, and of course Cuba. We have to be able to meet this kind of threat and to help others to meet it, and we intend to. A prime answer is this man and many others like him, the men of the Special Forces. This is their story. you come at it from the air, Fort Bragg, North Carolina looks much like any other Army reservation in the southeastern United States. A sprawl of buildings surrounded by thousands of acres of pine woods, hills, swamps, and streams. But Fort Bragg is different. It's different because here the 7th Special Forces Group of the 1st Special Forces has its headquarters. And here the most demanding military training establishment in the world operates, the U.S. Army's Special Warfare Center. These soldiers are different too. You have to look closely to see it perhaps, but in the next few minutes we will see that the difference is there. These are among the most able and most highly motivated men bearing arms in the world today. At the Special Warfare Center, they have occasion to work closely with men from the armed forces of other nations of the free world. Nations which are faced by communist guerrilla activity as a dangerous reality and an ever-present threat. Here they learn what they can do about it. To begin with, every Special Forces soldier must be airborne qualified. Before he can even begin his intensive specialized training, he must have won the right to wear the wings and canopy insignia of the paratrooper, in itself an item not lightly acquired. There's no special age limit for men of the Special Forces, but clearly without perfect physical condition and deep reserves of endurance, no man can meet the demands this assignment will place upon him. The nature of the work calls for a close working acquaintance with dozens of foreign weapons, as well as a perfect knowledge of every light weapon used by our own armed forces. Every lesson must be learned well. Each man must know his specialty inside out, because when the time comes, he must himself function as a highly able teacher of everything he's been taught. Always, formal instruction is followed by intensive practical application. At the firing range, he works with weapons common to the Far East, South America, Europe. His fingers become familiar with the ammunitions used by each. He gets the feel of the weapons in his hands, stamps their individual characteristics indelibly in his thinking. He tries for himself what they can do. He learns by doing. A second required skill is communications. Every man of a Special Forces team must be able to assemble and use the components of portable long-range transmitter receivers. And the communications specialist must be able to repair and maintain the equipment, even build a set from parts available. In all skills, the men are cross-trained. This means that a man must be expert in his particular specialty and competent to handle the job of others as well. So the communications specialist must be able to send and receive 18 words per minute in Morse code. But every man must be capable of at least 5 words per minute. Special Forces work is a risky business, and no one man can be indispensable. The guerrilla's life is limited to the isolation of wild terrain. He can't live and operate within walking distance of a supermarket, so he fends for himself, with traps like these providing rabbits, wild pig, and other small animals for food. Traps, too, can act as silent, deadly sentries, patiently awaiting the approach of hostile men. First aid is another of the basic skills which Special Forces carries far beyond its ordinary meaning. The Special Forces medic carries a kit which provides surgical tools and even a basic set of dental instruments. Through weeks of work with Army doctors, the Special Forces medic acquires almost as much practical knowledge as did the country doctor of 25 years ago. He learns to set a broken bone, care for a gunshot wound, remove an appendix, treat a serious burn. And of course, every man is cross-trained in basic first aid. At Fort Bragg, the potential Special Forces soldier learns to blow up just about anything, with just about anything. A prime function of unconventional forces is to disrupt lines of communication and supply. Here the student learns just how much of which kind of explosive placed exactly where will do the job. He learns, too, to make a deadly weapon of hands, feet, elbows, fingers. Instruction in judo and karate is very thorough. As you will have gathered, these are determined, aggressive soldiers. But if you're looking for a bunch of wild men who will go around breaking up the furniture on Saturday night, you'll be disappointed. 3 M's characterize the Special Forces man: maturity, motivation, military. Emotional maturity is a must, and lack of it will wash a man out fast. And without deep motivation, or to say it a more familiar way, dedication to the job, none of these men would be here. They are soldiers with a purpose. As one officer aptly understated it, American citizens interested in doing something for their country. Their work in doing something for their country will take them to places where knowledge of the local language is essential. A total of 19 different languages is taught at the Special Warfare Center, ranging from Chinese to Czech, from Spanish to Vietnamese. Every man learns at least one of them. All the training, all the work is directed toward this moment. This is where an actual assignment begins for a Special Forces team, the isolation area, where they will be briefed in detail about their mission. They will leave behind them in the isolation area all personal items, anything which might serve to identify them. Security precautions are a familiar and accepted part of their work. Here they will stay until they move out, without fanfare, unnoticed, to their destination. Security is an important word in the vocabulary of the Special Forces man. He understands the necessities involved and accepts them without losing his sense of humor. For example, a popular poster at the Special Warfare Center featured the familiar face of Groucho Marx with an 8-word slogan: "Say the secret word and get 20 years." Besides the main training operation at Fort Bragg, there are Special Forces centers located in the Far East and in continental Europe. From these three areas, men can be sent to wherever their skill and dedication are needed. In the meantime, that skill is kept sharp by the constant pressure of realistic and detailed training missions. You're going to get a look at one of these now. The Alps. Beautiful, but a cruelly rugged place to conduct military operations. In other words, perfect training country. In a small valley near the Swiss border lies the German town of Bad Tolz. And here is the United States Army's Flint Kaserne, headquarters of the 10th Special Forces Group in Europe. Training missions are frequent, rugged, and realistic, and each of them begins, as would an actual operation, with a highly precise and detailed briefing. Here the leader of a Special Forces team outlines the job ahead. Airdrop into a remote valley, ski cross-country to rendezvous at an isolated partisan headquarters, and help partisan forces in the demolition of an important railway bridge deep in the mountains. Other United States soldiers will act as partisans and as aggressor forces. At dawn on the pre-selected day, the team is ready for airlift. Parachutes on and equipment checked. Much painstaking planning and rehearsal are behind them. From this moment, things must move with speed and precision. They will be over the drop zone in an hour. At the drop zone, a reception committee of friendly partisans awaits the drop. These men are few, but they are highly important. Consider this bit of arithmetic. Skillfully directed guerrillas can tie down conventional troops 10 times their number. And a single Special Forces team can organize, train, and direct a force of 1,500 guerrillas. It is possible for the men leading this aircraft to be the means of immobilizing 15,000 trained enemy troops. The reception committee works swiftly for their assembly. There's only slight danger of hostile observation in this high mountain-locked valley, but every moment of time between now and the demolition of the objective is spoken for. With the reception committee leading, the team is soon under cover of the woods and on its way to the partisan camp. Partisan headquarters at the moment is an abandoned woodcutter's hut several miles from the valley and still higher in the mountains. There's a cordial welcome for the men of the team and for the supplies they've brought with them, especially the much-needed explosives. Just now, however, there's little time for socializing. The schedule is pressing. Much remains to be done. According to plan, members of the Special Forces team go along with the raiding party to advise and aid the partisan leader and his men in the demolition of the bridge. This will be a typical guerrilla operation. Interdiction is the military word for it, and it is the guerrilla's stock in trade. Its meaning is simple. Cut communications and supply lines. Destroy personnel and equipment. Come from nowhere, strike, and disappear to strike again another time and place. This is high country, beautiful country. It can also be dangerous country. point within a few hundred meters of the bridge, the men remove their skis and place them so they face back along the escape route. The movement from partisan headquarters has taken longer than estimated and longer than allowed by the time schedule. Only 15 minutes remain to line up the operation, strike, and get out. The bridge is there as described. The sentries patrolling it are from a command post just up the hill beyond the bridge. From this moment, the entire operation will have to be virtually soundless. One group will have to get in close and take out the sentries without rousing attention in the nearby command post. A second group will work into positions near the bridge from which they can move quickly to set their demolitions charges as soon as the sentries have been silenced. Time is running out. If the schedule laid down by the command at Bad Tolz is to be met, less than 5 minutes remain. Following military procedure, the Special Forces men act as advisors and observers, but will take no part in the action itself, except in extreme emergency.